Bat Force Radio.
Bat Force Radio is rated M for mature, or should that be immature?
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode of Bat Force Radio. Joining us today is a very special guest, but let's go ahead and kind of introduce ourselves. I'm Grandpa Batman from Dallas, Texas, and joining me is Robin D. Cross from the blistery winter Canada.
Good evening.
Joining us today is a very special guest, like I've said. His name is Russell Beattie from Giant Panda King, and we are here to discuss the book Gotham, 1919 to 1939, which is... It's always interesting when someone can create an homage or a new version of the Batman mythos, but do it in a way that seems so original. And that's really what this book is about. So joining us today is Russell Beattie, Giant Panda King. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say one thing before we get started to your audience. The reason I'm so close to the screen is just I'm having some audio issues, and just to hear everything, I'm leaning really close to my monitor. I'm not trying to do a power move or flex some intimidation method. It's just I'm getting older and I'm hard of hearing.
And we were also doing some freaky stuff before we started recording. So.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And if you could just kind of give us backstory about how you got started, and what is Giant Panda King and what it is that, you guys are doing with this publishing.
Yeah, well, it's a big question, but I'll try my best. So when I was young, my main passion was films, and then looking back, it's more storytelling and whatnot. And storytelling is just such a fundamental part of humanity, and I find we're getting lost a bit like that these days with storytelling. Like, it's more driven by algorithms rather than humans, which we've always kind of had that organic experience. So the more I trained to enter the film industry or the entertainment industry, or how you want to see it, the more I fell out of love with it, so to speak. So I didn't like all the magic was gone. And it wasn't because, you see how the sausage gets made kind of situation. I mean, like, the values of what I thought were storytelling in the entertainment industry and, that kind of stuff, they weren't shared by the industry. And I realized very young that I didn't want to work in the industry, but I still wanted to make content, Well, I just said content. Those who have ever seen me in an interview or everything, I say content's an evil word for me, just because I want to make stuff what lasts a little bit longer. But essentially, all these ideas and these feelings were kind of were going through at the time, and I was still trying to break the industry. I was young and still held out hope that someone's going to offer to give me a chance to make a big movie or something like that. But yeah, and I kind of left the industry and started working in the burlesque scene in the UK when I went over there. And that was the magic I was kind of looking for, what the industry didn't give me. And that magic, I knew what I wanted because I grew up with my friends making films. I went and studied at, film school and everything. So when you had that freedom to do what you want and no pressure on like trying to sell it or anything, and took that commercial element away, that was where the magic was for me. We could just experiment. And I still for the next little while, dab my toe in the industry every so often, just kind of like, like an abuse victim, just keep going back because I thought it would treat me differently, but it just got worse. And then, so I'm cutting out a few steps here, but essentially I started doing live stuff more because I was so immediate, and you had to do everything. So I was like the costume designer, I was the director, producer, production manager, like casting. Even when I had to perform, and it was so immediate. If you didn't have it on the night, you just had to go on anyway. Because, that old maxim of show must go on, it's true, must. So you kind of start developing some principles and ethics and all that built around how you work. And I just like, why can't I bring this to the thing I mainly love, which is like film, and storytelling a bit more. Because like I love doing live stuff, but it's one of those things you have to be there. It never translates. Good live entertainment doesn't translate to other mediums. Only bad live entertainment does. So the magic you experience there, everything's got its own unique kind of. I keep using magic, but that's what I like saying. Like Jim Henson was magic. Buster Keaton was magic. Like those guys brought their own. They are the magicians, but their format, instead of the stage and tricks and illusions, was celluloid. And so for me, that was a big part of it. Was just I wanted to be those guys, like your Lon Chaney's, and where they did everything. It didn't go back to the 70s and stuff, like your Russ Meyers, your John Carpenters, all those Roger Cormans. Not everything they made was great, but you could see that they made it.
It was authentic.
There was a fingerprint on everything they made. And for me, I just wanted that kind of freedom. So I had a record label. I owned a music venue for a number of years. I managed bands. I've done every kind of show you could probably imagine. Basically, my bread and butter was burlesque. I put a show together which kind of took off. It tours the world still now. I just finished my last Australian tour last night, so I've had about an hour and a half sleep since I finished there. I got to bed about 4:30 this morning, and I was up at I don't know. But anyway, it's and that show itself is a way I could combine my passions, my fandom, with a commercial like format.
Right.
And then I could see, okay, this is what it's like when Jim Henson started the Creature Shop. This is what, So that's the stuff I'm more interested in, building that thing. I never wanted to go big. When you go big, you lose control, and that's not what I want to lose. I have a very small team, and we make products the way we want it. We're not driven by money or anything like that. Like, don't go. We like money because it allows us to make what we want to make. But I'll never, there's a reason we're not on Amazon. There's a reason we're not, everywhere. And like, we're not very good at social media. It's not our thing. We've sold more books than we have fans on Instagram. So, I don't know how that math works, but it's working. But essentially, about 4 years ago, I decided to clean my slate and just move forward. I just want really clean things. Like, my time in the desert is done. I'm now back and I'm ready to kind of go into the next thing. So we created Giant Panda King, and we got really focused on what we want to put out. And I have always about 50 projects going at one time. Now, and they're not all active. Don't get me wrong. That sounds like a weird flex, but it's they're not. Like the Batman book, we shot over 10 years.
Wow.
So I'd go back every couple of years and shoot a bit more. So those models in the Batman book, for example, the Gotham, they age naturally through that time period. So if you look at the Robins, for example, each Robin in there is the first time they're in the book, they're 12. The next time, they're 21.
Wow.
So I have Dick as Robin coming back to play him as Nightwing, the same kid as he grew up.
Okay.
And then you see Dion, our Batman, and he ages through the book as well.
Yeah, like I saw you have a Dark Knight Returns in there, so
yeah, I couldn't age him that much. Every other photo is the one guy, and he just ages because we did it over a 10-year period. And that was
I was just gonna say, wow, you've been taking these photos for 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can hide behind the aesthetic. So
yeah.
But essentially, Giant Panda King was created to just put out content when I wanted to, the way I wanted to, and not have pressure of outside, forces. And yeah, we just want to create stuff what, you get off the bookshelf in 10 years and you can still get something out of it. And I guarantee everyone, no one's found all the Easter eggs in the book yet or anything like that. You could look at it for ages and still try and find stuff. But the main thing for us is to make high-end products, books, films, podcasts, whatever we want to do. And essentially, we're going to be doing that for probably the next 18 months with books, and then I'm shutting the publishing side down of the company. I'll be sending over my stage show, my burlesque stage show. I don't know if I mentioned the name, I can't remember. It's called The Empire Strips Back. It's a big Star Wars themed burlesque show. I'd say it's probably one or like in the top biggest kind of burlesque shows in the world, like as far as the scale of what we tour. Like we've got full size replicas of Jabba the Hutt and land speeders and tauntauns, are rideable and all that stuff in it. So
we're doing this.
Yeah, if anyone looks at it, it's just The Empire Strips Back. Make sure you look up my version. A lot of people have stolen my name and done smaller versions, which power to them. I don't own any of these concepts. They're all part of the super fandom where we just, all add our own little take to it. But yeah, essentially it was just that. And then 18 more months of like kind of working with other people's products and IP. And then we're pretty much going all original content after that, which some people kind of, when I mention that online, they freak out. They go, oh, we're going to miss all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, you're still going to get plenty of Batman content and Spider-Man content and all that from the big studios. We just want to give you something new. We want to be the next kind of Marvel. We want to be the next this. I love nostalgia. I think it's great, but I think nostalgia is a potent drug, what we're all addicted to when it comes to our fandom and storytelling. And yeah, seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in a film, and tying that film legacy, that's amazing. But that's when it's done well. I'm worried about the next couple of years when, the studios try and grab in, because we all remember how it ended up when everyone tried to copy the MCU,
right.
Originally, and try to forced all these shared universes. So we're just very conscious of like how fandom can turn the current so quickly. So we always try and just be authentic to what we're trying to do. We're just trying to focus on making one thing at a time, and do it well, essentially, and take the time to do it.
Right.
I don't know if that was the answer. Is that what
No, I totally get it, because, you want to take the fans and your audience with you on the journey. For example, like you said, nostalgia can be a slippery slope. Like for musicians, for example, like maybe they're in a big, rock and roll band, and then they decide to go solo. Well, you're always going to have those fans that come to the concerts and they only want to hear the songs that they know from, the big band days. But if all that you do is sing those old songs, then you're never going to build a new audience for what, or what that musician, that solo artist is trying to do moving forward, and they get stuck. So I know, for example, I'm a big fan of the band Oasis, and Noel Gallagher went solo, and his brother Liam went solo. And at their shows, yes, they play some of the old stuff, but they push their fans to accept the new stuff that they're working on. Because if all they want to come is hear Wonderwall, then just turn on the radio. Mm-hmm. But you got to take them with you moving forward. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, and you're not going to have a future. So I totally respect and get where you're going with the future of your business and Panda King, Giant Panda King.
But it's funny because everyone I say they get upset, and I'm like, guys, I've still got like 4 more books coming out.
Yeah. And
my books aren't small. That's a lot of content.
This is a lot of content. Yeah. Let's kind of get into that, because the one thing about Gotham 1919 to 1939, I love the concept because it comes like it's an actual collection of historical data. It pretty much, the way I saw it is, it's almost like presenting Gotham, even though we know it's fiction, but it's presenting it as a historical place. And these are the events that, going up to 1939, could have inspired Bob Kane and Bill Finger to create the comics that went forward and followed, that we read today. So, I love the time period that you chose to build this world in and present. So let's bring up the photos. Here we are. Here's the cover. Gotham, 1919 to 1939, an unauthorized detailed account of Gotham. I mean, just that front cover right there with Joker is enough to sell me. And could you give us a little information about this person that portrayed Joker?
Yeah, that's Anthony. I've known Anthony probably since I was 18, so quite a long time. And he just had an interesting look. The first time I met him, he was like you could almost see through him. He's so skinny and whatnot. But he has this physicality about him, and he can portray a strong character, even though he's so skinny and and he's such a gentle person. But he can turn it on, become one of the most intimidating looking people you could ever meet, and looks scary. And he plays the Joker, but he also plays I think 5 other roles in the book. So he's also Man-Bat. He's also Mr. Freeze.
Okay.
I think he's one of the stand-ins for Deadshot, maybe. I can't remember. But yeah, Anthony's one of my go-to guys. So he's been in number one of my stage productions, but he's also because we're just finishing up our first feature film, what we shot during COVID, and he's my kind of creature monster in that, so his physicality is incredible, and I always thought he'd be the perfect Joker for years, because he has one of the best Joker voices and laughs, and it's a shame that's in the book form because he does it so good, and he's kind of the closest thing to kind of Hamill's Joker, but in real life.
Right.
He has a bit more of a creepiness to him than, I suppose, the Hamill's Joker. It's a little bit more broken when he says stuff. But yeah, he's amazing, and it's a shame because someone like that will never be cast as the Joker in films at this stage. And that's a shame, because that's what we're after.
Yeah,
and that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a comic accurate kind of Joker based on the context of when we've set the books, obviously, in the between the two world wars. But yeah, he's just meant to feel as intimidating as all those deep dive vintage photos kind of thing, where people bring up online and whatnot. But he's a combination of and I always say my version of the Joker is a combination of Salvador Dali and John Dillinger. And Anthony he definitely brings that alive.
An artistic gangster. I like that.
And that cover image, that perfectly sums up it. It's just perfect evidence of how perfectly the look that you're going here, this sort of noir look, how well the aesthetic, that's the word that I was trying to find there, how well the aesthetic that you're using here fits with the Batman and Gotham mythos. It works so well with the subject matter.
Yeah, well, that's when when I was coming up with it, I knew a lot of that period because I was always fascinated by that period. I find that period is when that's when it really changed, where we went from being of the old world into the new world, between the two world wars, was when we had a massive, massive change. And then after World War II, we kind of, we settled into what the modern world kind of is now. But yeah, I was just going, what would make sense in history? Where would Batman make the most sense? These days, it's kind of silly when you see skyscrapers that big, him being on top, and looking down. I love the Nolan films, but I always thought it was so stupid when he was standing on top of the church, because he was so, was it the church? But that pointed building, he's just standing on top of it. he's so high up. How's he gonna get down? Like,
how's he going to
for
see the
films
crime
based in
happening on the
reality.
street?
Yeah,
That's always
everyone
been
looked like ants. And then, like, because thing is, he was so high, and they showed this skyline. There was nothing for him to shoot to or anything. And like, for me, if that was in like Snyder's film, I'd be like, fine, that's the rules they're playing by, because that's a lot more, a lot more far fetched. But like Nolan's was all based in reality. That was the whole point of it. It was grounded. And that one just looked so silly to me, because I was like, how does he get down? But then
it's the kind of thing that we just have to suspend that.
Like, what makes sense for my reality,
Right.
And around that time, most apartments and buildings were only like 5-6 stories,
Right.
a lot more alleyways, a lot more slums, things like that. And I started thinking, how does he work in this world? Like, what makes him different? Well, he doesn't have, like, he might have a radio, but how does he power the radio? Because, all that kind of stuff. And then we're like, okay, well, the way he communicates, well, a light makes sense. A beacon at that time makes sense. But a bat signal now, apart from it being used as a symbol to put, fear into villains, and criminals, now just text him. So for me to justify a lot of the equipment he uses and everything, I had to put it into a period where it originally made sense.
Right.
And that's why, like Gordon in the book, we show a searchlight. And in Australia, that was very hard to come by, to find a period accurate searchlight. There was only 3 of them in Australia, what I could find to shoot with. But that is a 1938 searchlight, I believe, what we use in there. But the whole point is just making it feel grounded and have context. And if we want to feel real, we had to pick a period where technology was fast developing, that he could have access to the stuff we love about him, but also make it grounded. Like, like batarangs, for example, I think are the most when the way they're portrayed in films and whatnot, I think they're so silly. The reason it was called the batarang originally, because he had one of them and it came back to him. Like it was, it was a proper boomerang in the shape of a bat, and it was a throwing weapon. Yeah, so you sup on the screen there. You see that, like, here we've gone, okay, so for ours, we're going to make it, because throwing, how many batarangs are you going to have to carry on you to make it practical? So instead we made it a bigger weapon. We made it something you could actually use into hand-to-hand combat. So it's actually a knuckle duster. And that's why you see like the Robins using that. And then, we also put a blade on the end of it, and then also a climbing tool on the other side of it. So it has a multi-use weapon. It's like a Swiss Army knife, and he has one of them rather than, 50.
Well, and then if you ever played the video games, he has about 5 million in his pocket.
Exactly, which is fun in a video game, because that's the context of the world. But for us, we had to make it seem more real. So our grappling gun, for example, that doesn't lift him up, because that power of that technology is kind of only, like, if you've seen any YouTube channels where they've tried to actually make it, or Mythbusters, it's not so simple, So what we've used is that he would more use it for scaling, to slow his descent down, rather than to like fly up out of nowhere and whatnot. So we just have to kind of say, what is our Batman's world and what are the rules of that world? And the 1920s to the 1930s just made so much sense to us. Also from a political point of view, and the social aspect of America, where you had the public enemies period as well, where all the gangsters were portrayed as celebrities anyway, like John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd. Those guys were all larger than life, and I was like, they are, comic book characters. Bonnie and Clyde, Harley and Joker, like, there are these like real life counterparts to all these comic book characters, and that's what I say in a lot of interviews, is that everyone in the book has a real life counterpart I base them on, but yeah, that period just made so much sense to me. So that's why we chose it. And then the more I looked in, like the more I researched it and everything, the more it just kind of locked in, and it just felt right. And we just kind of rolled with it.
I love that, this book is not just hey, let's dress up some people from this era. It's actually a story, and it starts from the very beginning. You've titled it The Rise of the Bat, and it goes throughout Batman's career. And you can see, I mean, there's a lot of content. And another thing is that you took, information and stories from comics, movies, even the animated series, and perfectly blended them all into this compilation.
That's every story has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and that's what makes a good story. Comics don't; they just keep keep it going.
Let's just keep going.
Yeah, and for me, it was important to acknowledge all the great Batman stories I love, and going, how does that work? I'm going to have to edit some stuff out, obviously. From I can't have everything in there, but I can have enough to make everyone realize that exists in this world. Like for me, I'm not a major fan of Court of Owls. Like I think it's okay. It's just not my bag. It was okay, but everyone wanted Court of Owls in there. And I want to see Court of Owls. I want to see Talon. And a lot of guys buying it, they grew up on Court of Owls, so it's just as important to them as, say, Kingdom Come was to me, when I was reading that. But if I did it, I had to do it a little bit differently. I couldn't just do Court of Owls. So, and a lot of people don't like this because they're like, oh, keep it out of Batman and all that. Like when I talk about racism of the time and the political situation, all that. I'm like, dude, like, crack open a history book. And that's what I say. This is a history book with Batman. It's not a Batman with history.
Right.
Okay. So I changed the Batman characters to fit into history. I don't change history to fit the Batman characters.
Well, I mean, as I read through this, I was like, that would make sense. That's exactly how secret societies would be established and what their ultimate end game would be. And that's really what the Court of Owls is. And you also get into the false faces. And
well, the false face of the courts are so similar when you kind of look at them on paper.
Right.
So, and like Hush and Black Mask are kind of similar backstories if you really break them down, like wealthy families connected to the Wayne, blah, 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 blah. And for me, I was just trying to find some point of difference because when you read comics, it doesn't matter because, they're individual stories broken up by sometimes years. Some of these characters have like decades before they pop back into the comics. But for me, in the book, they're only a couple of pages apart. So we need to make sure that the stories all feel unique and they all feel genuine. Hush, I have to admit, Hush was one of the ones I did struggle with because he's a great character, but you need time with that character. And I was trying to make him jump out on paper, and like it is tricky because like, why does he wear the bandages? I'm trying to aesthetically do it, but I'm like, you know how much time it must take to put that shit on every time, So I kept it comic accurate, that look, but it kind of killed me a little bit because it just didn't seem practical. And like I get that look when it's dark, man. He's gonna
dark
face.
Man.
Yeah. No, but we did it because there is sometimes I just go, you know what, we'll do it the fan way. But but then there's other times where Clayface we kind of we stuck to what we thought was right, which was making him a burnt victim, and then a super obese burnt victim whose skin was so like soft and malleable, but it wasn't. He didn't have his powers or anything. He's more based on the original Clayface. So
I like the story that you wrote for how Harvey Dent was disfigured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that story, a lot of people who've seen something like the Border Empire will kind of know a character called Richard Harrow who had a very similar kind of aesthetic. I started working on this before Border Empire, but essentially, of the time, these men were called the Tin Men because I'd wear these tin faces over there. They had these tin prosthetics over their disfigurement because this was the first time in World War I where shrapnel was used to such a degree to rip people apart. Like you always had like cannon fire and all that kind of stuff, and like would create splinters. But these were grenades and missiles and you know, things like that, what they were using in mines and all sorts of nastiness in World War One. Those weapons we'd never used before in a major war, and we just threw everything at each other and see what worked, and it was like horrific. So you'd have all these guys come back with disfigurements, and we didn't have this medical skills to, you know, heal them properly or treat them properly. So there'd be horrible disfigurements, and the best what they could do was create like a cover for it.
Right.
And for me, Harvey Dent, I like the character, and the relationship of Bruce and Harvey, what makes the dynamic between Batman and Two-Face so interesting for me. And I gave them a really strong history with each other. They're best friends. And then when Bruce takes up this like ambition to become Batman, and Harvey Dent has this ambition to eventually become the mayor of Gotham, Bruce just thought, yeah, when I'm this guy protecting him there, Harvey's in office, I can trust him, They had these plans what young guys have when they're in college together, you know, and like in my book, he never let Harvey know he's going to become a symbol of something and protect the city. But he thought one day this is going to happen. And Harvey in the back of his head also thought, you know, being best friends with the, you know, royalty of Gotham will help my advancement. And it did.
Right.
So, you know, Harvey was on track he was the youngest district attorney in history of Gotham in the book. And then he thought a fast way to kind of keep his career going in the right direction was joining up to World War One and coming back a war hero. And he reckons he would have been, you know, the mayor of Gotham before he was 30. You know, that was his ambition. But it all came to an end when he got the shrapnel. And he lost everything. He lost his career. He lost his friend because his best friend was missing in action, which was Bruce. His fiancée left him because of his disfigurement, and he was forced to do the one thing he didn't want to. He had to move back home with his father. And losing all that kind of messed with his post-traumatic stress. It mixed with his, you know, early bipolar and, you know, multiple personality disorder. But, you know, back then they wouldn't have been able to just diagnose that. And it just grew over the next few years until it festered. And then he realized that you'd take off the tin mask and become Two-Face. But it was done over years. It wasn't an overnight thing.
Right.
Because Bruce comes back eventually and kind of, he's Batman and he neglects his friend. And that's something Bruce has to live with. That he created Two-Face as much as he created all the other villains in Gotham.
Now, who did like your, you know, special effects and prosthetics and
Yeah, so we design all of it, but I like in the sense of like we work out how we're going to do it and everything. So we do that in-house. And then depending on whether what scale it's going to be, I have about 3 companies I work with. So this particular one, so the main guy who did most of the book is a guy called Bloodhound FX, Stuart there. Mm-hmm. Then you've got another one who was Dave SFX, who did a few things really early on, and they hold up really nice. And then this one here is done by Odd Studios. Now, Odd Studios is very high end. They just happen to be friends of mine, so they help me out when they can. But they won the Oscar a few years ago for makeup effects on Mad Max Fury Road. They're also done like the last Aliens film, the last Pirates of the Caribbean. Look them up. I made their show reel, so it looks awesome. But they're amazing. They're one of the best in the world as far as they're just really nice guys, very sweet and humble guys. But there's some of the best makeup effects artists in the world, and you can Google Odd Studios, and you know the internet will back me up on that one. Their work is incredible. Give them a follow because you really dig their stuff. But unfortunately, because they're like some of the biggest in the world, like they were the main makeup effects guys on Thor: Love and Thunder, because that shot down here. So the new Thor movie, they did all the creature effect designs, and they were they ran the makeup department and special effects department. Like as far as you know, creature effects and everything, they didn't do the beauty stuff, obviously, but they're amazing, and they're just super humble guys. I don't know if anyone knows, remembers that show Farscape back in the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was made with the Hanson Company, and they made that in Australia. And that's where all the odd studios kind of came out of that, all the guys who worked on that. And if anyone remembers how amazing those special effects were for a 90s TV show, like the practical effects and the character designs, they came out of there, and Odd Studios was kind of born out of the makeup department in the Farscape.
Cool. And then you also have people that worked with you for like prop designs. I mean, here's Two-Face's coins, although that one's a pretty easy one to do. But who made like your batarang and
yeah, so I
this stuff?
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
that's
all this stuff I made or created. But it just depends on what it is. If I've got the skill set to do it, I'll make it. If not, I'll engage the right person to. I've got a pretty cool network of creative people we work with, and they love working on our stuff because it's fun and it's a little bit different. And the biggest thing, if you want to work with creative people and you want to engage them, and if the more busier they are, the best thing you can do is just have a very clear idea of what you want. You might not know the specifics, but just you have to kind of know what you want. And most people, when they deal with creatives, they just know what they don't want, and that's really hard because you present them stuff and they're like, no, don't like that, don't like that, don't like that.
Yeah.
It always helps if you have a clear idea of what you want. And I suppose that's the biggest thing I'm known for, is that I know what I want almost immediately, and I'm very direct, and I know exactly what to tell you. And I'm always open to be surprised by stuff, but I'm pretty clear cut in what we're trying to achieve. And when you're trying to make this, like these giant projects for very little money, because we made this on a shoestring budget, because, I fund all this stuff, and during we sell it. It's a pretty expensive book, but, you can feel no one complains when they get the actual book. They always complain when they see the price, saying $100 or $90, or for Americans, I think it's $72, but in Australia it's $100. But $72 for Americans, and I go, yeah, but guys, like, it cost me so much more than that to actually make. So,
right,
everyone who gets the book sees the quality in it. But
definitely.
I mean, I'm engaging some of the best makeup artists in the world. It's not a cheap book.
Right.
They help me out, but I still have to pay them.
Right. For the audio listeners that are listening on like SoundCloud or iTunes, right now we're looking at a recreation of the Batman utility belt. You can also go to YouTube and watch this interview there. But this utility belt, I breaking this down, it has all the things that Batman would need to be a detective. He's got a magnifying glass. He's got a dusting brush for fingerprints. I even like the mini bifocals, all those smoke screen chemicals. Looks like he's got razors to kind of.
Before you also ask, some people have asked me, that's not all going to fit in there. It all fits in. I made it fit in practically before I shot it, because I didn't want to present anything that wouldn't fit in all that. So it does all fit in there. I made it work.
And do you just wear it around all the time now?
That's the only thing I wear.
Absolutely.
So I'm wearing, just so you guys know, I'm wearing that at the moment, and this T-shirt, and that's it. I'm Winnie the Poohing it at the moment.
I wouldn't expect anything else.
There is one thing, what in my idea, like there is one thing missing from that. So he also has this like portable little fold out, because you guys only see, like, I design so much more for the books, but I can only put so much in the books. So like if I could tell the full story, it'd be like a 500-page book, but I can't because people are already complaining how expensive it is. So but yeah, there's enough content in my head to fill up 500-page book, but I have to work all that out for it to make sense for me. Then I know what I can put in there, what I need for the audience. But the thing missing is he has this like little fold out speaker, and not speaker, like a microphone and like listening device. And basically he has all these points around the city hidden like switchboard. So in the book, you'll see Oracle, and she's at a switchboard, like an old fashioned like switchboard. So
Right.
Batman and Robin and all the different Bat people.
He's got
the Bat
microphones set
family,
up to kind of spy on
communicate
people.
through their own telephone line, which has hidden little, like the old police boxes. I don't know if you guys know much about the police boxes, but obviously they'll have these phones all over the city for police to use to ring the base and report things, you know. So Batman has his own network of that all throughout Gotham, and they just carry their own little fold-out receiver what they plug into a wall socket, and they'll connect them to their own switchboard.
I love it. Now we're looking at the first incarnation of the bat suit.
Our bed version, apparently. Everyone says that online. I'm like, it's because he's got like those lips. But yeah, this is the first version, and some people go, he looks goofy, and I'm like, dude, history's fucking goofy. Like these guys aren't meant to look cool; they're meant to look accurate, you know. And when we were designing his first look, we based it on like what firefighters wore at the time for protection, and they wore leather, molded leather. So leather. Everything was made out of leather. All protection stuff was made of leather, like college football players and all that. They were called leather heads because all their armor was made out of leather. You know, so padded leather was what you used for protection at the period. So when he first starts, he has this leather look, which is very based on the original version of his appearance, which has more of the triangle look.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to emulate here. And this was created by a guy called Bob Bassett in Eastern European country. I forget. But he it was very expensive. But I designed this up and I sent it off to him. And he did a great job, although he did post it on his socials before I got it and kind of wrecked my reveal. But anyway, that's the point.
Damn it.
But he did a great job creating what we wanted to do with that. And you'll notice that I don't do black under my eyes and I don't do a whiteout eye. It just doesn't make sense for our world, you know?
Yeah.
And I wanted something where he could get in really quickly. Not something like, again, with the movies, all that stuff makes sense for that. That's fine. They don't need to show that. But in my head, I'm like, how does he get dressed? Because those suits they wear in the movies, I've worked on film sets and they take about 45 minutes to get on those costumes, and they'll take about 3 or 4 people to put them on you, and that's great. But I'm trying to ground mine even more, so I made it so it was a mask you just pull up, and it's got some strings at the back where you pull, and it tightens all up here, and then it's a t-shirt, pants, trunks, boots, the belt, and the leather cape that does up here. That's it. You can put it on, and we have in 3 minutes time.
Wow.
So
and especially
they're just the things we look at and if it makes sense to us, it makes sense in the book, then it makes sense to everyone else.
Right. And, you know, Bruce Wayne is known for being at like, you know, social events, and bad guy comes in and he's got to get in suit and action really quick. So he doesn't have time to sit there in front of a mirror and black his eyes out and take 45 minutes to put on all the armor and stuff.
And when Gordon turns on the signal, there's the difference between the time that he would expect Batman to show up because something serious is happening, and he's not going to expect to take it as long as he ordered a pizza and he's waiting for the pizza to show up.
Yeah. So in one of the designs I did was like he has different suits stationed all over the city. In like lockers and things like that, like train terminals, things like that, where you can go and boom. But you also got to remember, he plays matches Malone a lot in my world. I only mention it once in the book, but he's a freaking celebrity. He's one of the most powerful men in the country, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't want to go too much into the... are you guys aware that I've got sequel? I got sequel books coming out to this.
Okay.
But yeah, he has a massive business rivalry with Lex Luthor in my world. But like those guys are on the papers almost every other day. You know, like Bruce Wayne for me is based on Howard Hughes. So you can see like you could see how he would be treated in reality by studying how Howard Hughes was treated by the media and things like that.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I kind of see Bruce Wayne having slightly a mental illness himself, you know, but it's one of those mental illness what makes him amazing it makes him driven and whatnot. And you know, we're in the modern age now. Saying mental illness is not a bad thing necessarily. It's just people are wired differently, and the thing where he's wired that he was gonna become a vigilante and dresses up as a bat is not a normal thing.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of reflect that, and how does that deteriorate as he gets older? And you know, if anyone wants to know, he has a very similar ending to Howard Hughes, where he loses his mind to dementia and phobias, and you know, those sins of his past come back to haunt him. He's broken physically. He pushed his body to the limit. You can't do that. Like me, I've been on, you know, touring bands and burlesque shows and other theatre productions and rock shows and all that for the last 15, 20 years. Trust me, my body is done. You know, like, so he would be 10 times worse. So that's the stuff I find interesting, you know, like he still pushes himself.
Right.
And like, I really wanted to show his age in that Dark Knight Returns photo, you know.
Let me pull that up.
You know, and you can see it there. You can see the hurt, but he still has that physicality about him. But like his skin's softer, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
but and also that I want to reflect the mask. I want to reflect all the masks. I want to reflect something, and that one was meant to look like an old leather boxing, like an old leather kind of punching bag. That's what I wanted that mask to reflect, you know. And we gave him the trench coat there because it's more of a noir thing, being in the 50s, and it made sense a little bit more. And then, yeah, I wanted a super accurate Kerry Kelly for me.
Thank you.
I've never seen her done the way I'd want it, and it took me a bit to cast the right girl for her, but we got her.
Thank you very much. And I love that, you know, the whole book goes through the story, and then you add this at the very end in the epilogue.
Oh, the epilogues are the most fun for me. Yeah. I don't have to make it make a ton of sense. I just have to make it a little bit of sense because I don't talk about anything too much. So I can just put a random photo in there of the Justice League and let you guys figure it out.
Right. Well, there you go. You set it up for your sequels, like you talked about. Other things that you added, I love these. You added, you know, not just focusing on Batman, but also his allies. Obviously, you got to have Alfred. Who is this distinguished gentleman?
The performer?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's still alive because I shot this over a 10-year period. A lot of the older gentlemen are no longer with us, unfortunately. But I still think he's kicking along. I better check in on him actually. He just had this great look to him. Like he looked like he'd seen shit, you know, like he'd been to war. He's an older man. He never thought he'd be looking after a grown man still in, you know, in his kind of late 70s, early 80s.
Did you put out a casting call, or how did you find these people?
Oh man, the way I cast is super weird. Like I'll go down rabbit holes online, trying to find people. But I find a lot of the time, if you want these kind of guys, you have to go, like this guy in particular, he's actually a performer, an actor. So he was a little bit easier to find. He had channels out there where I could find him. And he just had a great look, and I knew I wanted him. But I collect these people over years, and I save them in folders. And some of them, you know, I lose along the way, their contact information and whatnot. But generally speaking, I have an eye for finding really interesting talent. That's one of the things I think I'm very good at. If I had to specialize, and if it wasn't creative, it would be casting, you know, because I know the right people for the right thing. And he has a great look. But like sometimes I just get up early and go to like the fruit market or the fish market or something like that. Because people who have to get up at 4 a.m. every morning or 3 a.m. to work, you know, 6 days a week and do hard labor work like that, they have faces what represent people from that period, you know, character faces, you know, and that's the thing. You want real people, you want authentic faces, and to get authentic faces, you have to get people who have an authentic job, you know, have an authentic life, not influences.
Yeah. This guy, Lucius Fox, that portrays him.
Yeah, well, he's very representative of like
perfect.
that period of the look of African Americans that period, like as far as what they were presenting in media or putting on the stage, whatever. There was a type of African American which was acceptable in business and things like that, you know, at that period, you know. And we wanted to make sure that this book doesn't shy away from that period's negative aspects like racism and things like that and how they presented it. And Lucius is our kind of like our he's so linked to all that because at that time, like right now, making him the guy who kind of, you know, publicly runs Wayne Enterprises now is not an issue. You can have Morgan Freeman playing him in Nolan films, that's fine. But having an African-American man running one of the biggest companies in America in the 1930s and late 20s, that's when we start saying, well, the period would not have that, you know? And that's when it starts becoming unauthentic. But then if you make that part of the story and actually have repercussions because of that, like a lot of these, like the Court of Owls and the False Face Society target Lucius, you know? So it's not just Batman all the time
right.
At the center of all this stuff. It's his people as well, you know?
Right.
And like, you know, Lucius is aware of it. So he also does it with his son as well, Luke.
And then we have here's Gordon.
Mm-hmm. So the thing about this guy, I used to work security. I still do occasionally if I need to make money, like to redo the reprints and to pay for everything for the reprints, like for the when we did all the pre-orders and situation. Because the money came in, but like it's good money, but you know it's a very expensive book to print everything because I do small runs, so I have to still earn money to make things to try and keep on schedule. So I was working security like 5 days a week and then shooting these extra pages for the second edition 2 days a week. But years ago, I was working security as like in my early 20s, and he was on my security. He was like I worked with him in security, and I just picked him up because he had one of these faces. It just looked like a brick with a moustache.
It looks like he's been in a few fights, you know. With
he's called Jawbreaker. That was his name. He was a cop. He was a riot cop who they had him look after all the bikies because we have bikie gangs down here in Australia. That's like our big criminal kind of stuff. And he was the one who'd go and break up their parties. I'd send him in. And he, Jawbreaker.
Jawbreaker. Wow. That's perfect. You nailed it with this guy. We're looking at Oswald Cobblepot.
He just looked what I wanted. Like I didn't want to do the penguin aspect with the pointy nose and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted someone who would get that nickname by just trying to dress fancy, you know?
Right.
And he just suits it, you know? He's just great. He has that Capone power to him, you know, that look in his eyes where he doesn't give a shit about anyone except him.
Yeah, I don't like how many iterations try to lean too much into the penguin aspect, and I think a lot of that comes from the Tim Burton stuff where he almost was an animal. He was so mutated. I really prefer the iterations where he's a fucking human being.
Yeah, he's a crime boss. He's a criminal. He's a businessman. Yeah. He's not a psychopath, to me anyway. That guy's. I think the previous guy who played the Penguin. I don't think he's not longer with us, unfortunately. So I don't know if you even got to see the book, unfortunately.
Damn. And then we have Carmine Falcone, one of the original crime bosses of Gotham. And this is in the book. This is still in the early, I think, the first chapter where you're setting it up.
The first 5 years.
Yeah, you're setting up. You know what caused the masks. You know the heroes. What caused the new type of villain. And this is, you know, Falcone. He's part of the one of the original crime families. But I looked at this guy and I was like, yeah, that's a guy that's
exhausted.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what's happening with the world. He doesn't, and everyone knows that because, you know, COVID. You know, even what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. It all seems so ridiculous, and to him, that's what would happen when people dress up as bats and clowns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this used to have honor. I come from a family of, you know, people with honor. We have a code, you know, and he
Right.
just sees that, and it's just, he doesn't get it, and he's exhausted by it.
Right. Now this, we're looking at Arkham
I
Asylum.
went very different with Arkham. I did go different with Arkham.
This definitely looks like a place that one would be sent to if you were criminally insane.
Yeah, I wanted something to feel like a tombstone, you know, but, you know, and like, in fairness, this photo is at this, like, as this place just got built, so they have no grass or anything, but I kind of like that about it,
Mhm.
and that the workers are going inside like they're marching to, like, hell, essentially.
Where was this location at?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth. I've tried to backtrack it a couple of times, and I think I just get distracted. I will have to look it up because everyone keeps asking me about it. I'm like, man, it's just, I have probably 20, 30,000 vintage images, what I've just collected over the years. I use as inspiration, or I
Right.
use, you know, in work. This was from a photo library, what we accessed, and we did a little bit of tweaking to it, but not much. It's pretty much the building, you know, but it just had this perfect vibe. I went from the Gothic look. I didn't want the Gothic look for
Right.
Arkham. It's been done to death.
Right.
I wanted this institution where they're like this new exciting science, you know. That's the thing, what fuels all these things, is because all the ethics get thrown out the window at Arkham. It's run by a crazy, you know, perverted warden in Hugo Strange.
Right.
And he encourages the abuse, but he's doing it from a place of sick, perverted pleasure. Where someone like the Scarecrow, he thinks he's helping humans in the long run by really pushing these new science, you know, psycho analytical sciences, you know, like psychiatry and whatnot. And like I said, there's, everything is based on something. So in the way I write, I give you something where you can research yourself in order to find more about this type of stuff I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think under the Scarecrow and talking about Arkham, I talked about like experiments like the little Albert experiment, you know, these very, very unethical things from history, what they did at the time because they thought it was, you know, in the benefit of humanity. Like, the reason we are also healthy these days compared to the old days is because during World War II and during these periods, they tortured so many people, like, in order to develop the pharmaceutical industry and all that kind of stuff during those periods, because they could never do it in a real world. And most people don't know this stuff, and I find it fascinating that, you know, the amount of people got like tortured and killed so we could have, you know, the pharmaceuticals, what we use these days to jam down our throats and whatnot. But essentially, history is such a fascinating thing when you really delve into it, and when you combine it with something what you have a passion with, like Batman, all this stuff starts, you know, having a new meaning. So I could just put that, if I showed you that photo with no context, you just go, okay, but then I put Arkham Asylum there, your brain starts going, what's in each one of those rooms?
Exactly.
You know? And that's the thing about the book. We have context, and our context is history.
Then we have the Joker, and I mean,
Handsome
again,
Anthony.
yes, I mean, when I put this on the Bat Force Instagram social media, I mean, I think this picture alone drew most of the comments. You know, people talking about, wow, this is really like the most sadistic, evil-looking Joker that they've seen, in a very complimentary way.
Yeah, well, he's a combination of a few different Jokers. His look, you know, the flower and the color palette is definitely taken from, like, I think a Sideshow Joker bust. That suit I got custom made. Like that and Two-Face's suit are all custom. They're very expensive suits, but they look the treat. The big thing with Joker, we want it to make sense for a real person. So you have the makeup rubbing off on the collar and on the tie from when he would tighten it, and on his top button as he does the buttons up. So you have makeup rubbing all over his clothes. That's the thing we wanted in there. So no matter how fancy he tries to look, there's always something a little bit like off about him.
Right.
You know? And I just wanted these fucked up teeth, like, because dental hygiene was not a big thing back then. You know, dentists weren't common, and they weren't very, you know, you could forge dental licenses so quickly, you know, back then. And then we went with, I wanted big hair because when he first appeared, he had, again, that triangle look to his head. So in the book, this is the first time he appears. So he has a lot more of that, like, original Joker vibe, you know, and we wanted to replicate the Man Who Laughs as well, that kind of creepiness from the original resource. So yeah, it's like everything in the book. We take as much references what are out there, what people know of. So there's a little bit of Hamill in there. There's a little bit of the Man Who Laughs. The decrepitness and everything's a little like of the makeup and everything is a bit of Ledger and, you know, Joaquin kind of vibes. So we just try and make it all work from all the different resources what we have and references.
Very cool. What else we got? Man, we got a lot of stuff. I took a lot of photos. You know, you
took a lot of photos.
I did, because there's so many. I mean, this book is full of just great imagery, great storytelling, and it takes everything, you know, from your golden era to your bronze era to your silver age, your animated series, even from the new 52, and even, you know, beyond that, and puts it in this world. And to me, that just makes so much sense. I don't know. I said something on my social media where I was like, I would love if we had gotten this as the new Batman film. And the response, and it may have been you or one of the other people from Giant Panda King, I thought this was so brilliant. It was like, you know, we see this more as like a streaming TV series. And I was like, that's even better because, I mean, you can tell more of the long story in this fashion.
Like, for me, the like Boardwalk Empire is a really nice reference purely because the aesthetics line up. But you tell multiple stories and it uses real history, but it puts some fake characters in there interacting with real history. You know, Carnivale is another good reference as far as aesthetically, because again, it's set there and it really shows the changing of the old world to the new world. Quite good. If you want to look at references, The Wire, as far as introducing a new element every season, you know, so it's not just black and white as far as, you know, good guys, bad guys. It shows you different aspects of the whole, how it is a self-perpetrating thing. Deadwood, as far as like creating characters who just embody a place. And that's why we call it Gotham. It's not just about Batman. It's about the city, you know?
Right.
So those kind of shows the ones we really like, and we could see the show, like this version working like that. Because, you know, people have read the book, the Shadow War is what kind of it builds to, you know, and then that would be like your second last season, essentially, would be the Shadow War, and you'd build that and it'd be a whole season, you know, but you'd foreshadow it, you know, and anyone who's seen Deadwood, they do really well in there, the way they kind of foreshadow the Pinkertons, because they'll mention them in the first season. Then the second season, you'll see one of their agents.
Right.
Then the third season, you'll see all of them, you know, but the way they present them, it's like this build-up. It's like this dread is building because you just hear about them for years. And then when you finally, they come, you know what's in store. And that's the same with the League of Assassins in my book, is that you hear about them and they're mentioned in the book at the beginning. So when it finally gets to that, the payoff is huge because the whole army comes to Gotham and a war takes place on the rooftops, essentially.
Right.
And I think I show that, like, you know, where we have like the city is based on, we used a photo from the Chicago fires, but it looks like the whole city's engulfed in like chaos.
Right. And then you also have the political aspect, you know, the socioeconomic, you know, aspect of, you know, the citizens of Gotham. I mean, this is a book really about the people of Gotham, not so much Batman. You've got people that they're tired of the Batman, you know, they see him as the cause of all the stuff that's, you know, happening to Gotham.
Yeah, like that's the thing. You're going to have people on both sides because that's
right.
how it works. Like the bigger you are or the point it is, you're going to have people who support you and people who don't, and people are undecided.
I want to get into some more of the awesome creative imagery that's in this book. I mean, you actually made a circus flyer for the Flying Graysons.
Yes, that one is based on a real trapeze family from like the 1908 or something like that. So it's kind of accurate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got good Photoshop skills, so we warp a lot of this stuff and adapt it and whatnot. But the thing about this one is like, if you look at the circus costumes, and then you look at the costume I put Robin in, the first Robin, he's actually just wearing his circus costume.
Yeah.
And it's a little nod to the original inspiration for Robin, which was Robin Hood, not Robin the Bird, And Errol Flynn was a big character at the time, so they based his look on like this swashbuckling kind of adventurer, That was because that was a big thing. It was a big, really popular Robin Hood with Errol Flynn at the time. So that's what comic guys said, oh, that works in movies, let's put it in here. And I copped a lot of crap again on this costume from a lot of people, like saying, it should be cooler. I'm like, read it in the context of the book, and it makes sense. Like,
people say the same thing
as they go on because there's a need. But in the beginning, it's a little bit silly. And that's the whole point, because the stakes raise as you go through the book, as Jason gets killed, as Barbara gets paralyzed, stakes get risen, costumes change, and
right.
You start looking more and more till eventually we get to what everyone kind of knows as what Batman is, But we're trying to acknowledge that over a 20-year period, things develop and change.
Right.
You have to start somewhere. And a lot of this stuff's presented out of context, when it's not in the book. Like I always say with Batfeed, who does the videos based on them, like his stuff he does, it's based on the book, but it's his take on my work. So like it's sometimes he fills in the gaps his way, but that's part of the fandom. Everyone can fill in the gaps their own way. This is just the way he expresses it. But I know with him, he loves trying to put more of the story in there, where myself, I'll pull back a little bit and let you guys fill it in. I give you enough, but part of me and part of the book experience is filling in the gaps, and I don't know, when I collected and when I read comics and everything, that was back in the 90s, like when I first got into it, and you didn't have the luxury of the internet. So I had to go and find this stuff and search for it and spend hundreds of dollars on magazines to read an article, which might tie in with this other article I read, and kind of put it all together that way. And yeah, it sucked because it was so time consuming, but it was great. The journey was great. And that's what I want these books to be, is that there's enough in there that if you read this part and this part and this part, and you put them together and research those individual things, then you know what I meant by that, But it's what you want to get out of it. The more you put into the book and the experience of the book, the more you read it, the more you research about the stuff I talk about, the more you're going to get out of it.
Now, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because I love when people adapt into the stories things like what would make Batman, theoretically functional as a being. And you mentioned he has places throughout the city where he has suits. Not only are they quick to put on, but he has places throughout the city where if he's nearby there, he can put on a suit. And I like when things like that are added. Like, there was a recent comic that was written by Mattson Tomlin. He's the screenwriter for the new Batman movie. And he wrote a comic recently, and he did some of that too. And I liked these ideas where he had one thing that Bruce Wayne did undercover was he would show up at construction sites where they were, maybe adding new floors to a skyscraper or something. He would show up there in disguise as like a construction worker who was supposed to be on that job there, and just blended in with the guys that were doing the work. But what he was actually doing was installing hooks into the foundation of the building so that he could install zip lines that would help him get traverse the city quickly. So it's really cool when people add things like that that would make it really possible for him to do the things that we see him do in stories. So how important was that to you to fill in some of these gaps of how a realistic take like this would actually be able to make these things work?
Yeah, well, I kind of lay it out in like the first few chapters. We kind of show you his network, what's slowly forming, and that grows and grows and grows. So, you know, your Lucius Fox, like obviously he can't run the Wayne enterprises as much as he would want to, while also running his vigilante operations and presenting himself as Bruce Wayne and, you know, covering up everything else. He has to be, that takes so much power. So Lucius Fox kind of handles that aspect. He's going to get hurt. He needs someone who he can trust. So you got Leslie, who looks after his medical needs. You know, Alfred, which covers him and makes sure that, you know, he's doing all the right things, keeping on the schedule, or that looks after his things. Then you get Harold, who's going to maintain his equipment and run the Batcave and things like that. You're going to have Ace, what's this dog for the security dog for the Batcave, you know. So these kind of things I put in there because he can't do it by himself. It's ridiculous to think he could, you know. So he has this network, and as he brings more and more people in, they expand the world, you know. They like, you know, Barbara, when she first starts, is kind of as a gaff, you know. She's like a folly. She's like doing as a bit of a joke, and it's kind of silly. And then, you know, she then, as everyone else, starts becoming very serious about it, you know. And by the time she becomes Oracle, she runs the communications for multiple people on the Bat team, because as the threats rise, those rose. For me, and also I love when that happens, but I also love putting in like the things he didn't think about, like the carry-on effect of his decisions, like Batman. That's what the biggest thing is, that he makes the right decision in the moment, but he's not aware of the carry-on effect that's going to cause. So, for example, with all this new technology he's investing in, he's doing it for his own needs, you know? So he's investing in new communication things for Wayne Enterprises, new blah, 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 new military contracts, things like that. He's doing it so he can start building his network he needs, very selfish reasons. But because he's linked to the stock market and all these other things, it affects everything. So secretly, it creates this like arms race, this technology arms race with all the companies, because they're seeing Wayne making all these big moves, and they need to keep up to keep their shareholders up and blah, 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 blah. And I don't really put this in the book, but that also is one of the contributing factors of overspending and overcommitment, which causes to this, the fall of the stock exchange, and causes depression. So Batman is directly linked to that.
Right.
You know, so they're the kind of things I get a kick out of as well, where we kind of figure out, you know, he might not be the main cause, but he's one of the contributing factors, just not directly, indirectly, because he wanted to be Batman. But he has a lot of power, you know. And it's like when you see like Joe Rogan or someone like that, you know, where they go, "Hey, I'm just saying stuff." It's like, yeah, but you've got a lot of power, you know. And that's what Bruce Wayne has as well. Like, I just want to fight criminals, but what comes out of that, you know? So I like real world consequences to very artificial fantasy settings, I guess.
And you mix in a little bit of fun. You throw in Batmite.
Yeah. One of my biggest things I like doing is trying to make these very silly characters, like from the 50s when they had the, you know, all the code come in, and try and ground them and make them feel real. And Batmite, you know, he's not an interdimensional imp in my version. He's a mascot for a newspaper who was trying to sell papers based on the Batman craze of the late 20s before it all went bad, essentially.
All right. What else we got? We got tons of photos here to look through. You mentioned Barbara. That I like that. We got Jason Todd. You include all of the Robins. You got Dick, Jason, even Tim Drake,
Damian,
Carrie.
And we have spoiler in there, but I don't make a Robin because I have a fair few Robins already.
Yeah, here we see Tim, and he, his armor is a lot different. You can tell, because he's later on how much more advanced it is than the first two Robins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then
Damien's is all pretty much leather protected one. I
where
believe.
did he go? I'm looking through my stash here. Oh, here he is. Yeah, there's Damien. A very innocent looking Damien, but he looks like he's a stone cold killer.
That's what I wanted. I wanted someone who had it in the eyes.
Yeah. The mask
Damien's
really
a big player in a big player in the next two books I'm doing.
Okay. Well, I'm all in for that. I do like, you included a lot of the Bat family. Here we have Luke Fox, Batwing, and I thought this was a real interesting choice on how you brought him in. He's a pilot.
Yeah, well, I always hate the Iron Man Batman look of him, like where he has that powered Batman suit.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it was a little bit silly, because like, when do we stop? You know what I mean? Like, how can Batman, like, it becomes that unrealistic for me when all these characters become essentially Iron Man and Superman and versions of Batman. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what's he going to do against Darkseid? Really, like, for me. And it showed in the Snyder Cut. Like, it always felt like Batman was just standing on the edge watching the action. It didn't feel real, And the one thing I hate about movies like that is that the difference of him punching a parademon and Aquaman punching a parademon and the Flash punching a parademon, they all should have different strength levels, It's more so in Marvel, like, someone gets punched, the Shatari gets punched by friggin' Black Widow the same way he gets punched by Thor, and it's just kind of silly. So a big thing for me is I wanted to ground some of these characters so they actually had a purpose and they just weren't another version of Batman, but the Iron Man version of Batman. So and at the time he's a pilot, and not just a pilot, that plane there, the Batwing, that's based on a very particular plane that's like the prototype to a helicopter. So it could slow down and I think go fly 5 miles an hour or something. So he'd be there to help Batman get us certain situations, to get to do reconnaissance, and he'd be there to he could like drop Batman off or people off on top of buildings, because it would slow down enough that people could jump and do a creative landing essentially. But yeah, so that was the Batwing, something practical in the city, which was the technology which was around at the time. But that kind of design only lasted a few years before they worked out something more practical and started developing the helicopter and whatnot in the 50s. But yeah, we just wanted something more practical for him, and we based him in Europe. That's where he grew up. So there was a reason he didn't grow up in Gotham, and it's like, why did he grow up in Europe? Well, African Americans were accepted a lot more in Europe at the time, and after things like Roswell not Roswell, is it Roswell? Oh, I'm blanking on the name, but like and the Oklahoma, Black Wall Street massacre, like things like that, which were big parts of history, which up till recently a lot of people didn't know until that Watchmen episode. But that kind of stuff would kind of go, okay, I'm worried if someone of means and wealth was worried about their children growing up in the country, which has so much hatred towards them, he would send them overseas, and Luke goes overseas, and I'll tell you one thing what happens to Luke. All right, so you'll find this out in the other books, but Luke is the guy who starts the Black Hawks in World War II.
Okay.
And World War II, Black Hawks get started, and the Black Hawks is an all African American. They're going to be based on the Red Tails, essentially. Right. But yeah, I just want to give him something more interesting, have his own career, and Batwing is a small part of that.
Okay. Also, with this book, you show the development of Bruce Wayne and his cause for becoming Batman, but also, some of his rogues, particularly Selena Kyle, which you take reference from the Frank Miller Year One, where she is kind of a dominatrix, and give her a little story.
Yeah, well, the whips and the masks and pseudo dominatrix at that point, like S&M, was a lot more innocent than it is now, kind of thing. But I never saw her as like someone who would sell her body per se, because I feel like she's too strong of a person to let a man dominate her like that. But her being in charge and like using whips and masks and things like that, I could see that kind of happening and kind of lead into the character a little bit more. But yeah, she uses it more to blackmail people. Like, so she,
Right. She always carries that power.
She's always thinking, And right. Those photos are actually based on some real photos from the 1930s, I think, in Australia, where it was a big kind of scandal back then, where the leader of the Australian Symphony Orchestra got caught with photos of him like that, essentially. Him and a woman. So I actually had a reference photo I based those on from the period. So yeah, it's like everything in there is so kind of accurate. Like I've got a reference for everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, Catwoman has this like, she definitely has an arc to her. Like she becomes then a professional, like, cat burglar after that. And she leans into the Batman persona. She realizes that she has to hide her identity after her mentor gets taken out, And then eventually she will, as she gets older, she starts stealing secrets and uses that and starts trading in secrets. So first she starts blackmailing, then she becomes a traditional thief, and then she becomes a thief of information, and that's how she stays in the game as long as she does, because she has very powerful friends and allies who she has secrets on, and that's how she manipulates. She's a lot more smarter. She plays 3D chess, and I find that part of her a little bit more interesting than just a woman who can just do backflips and whatnot. She's meant to be Batman's counterpart on almost every level, but she doesn't have the fancy training. Her training comes from the streets and actually being, forced to do it. Like, unlike Bruce, she wasn't born with money or wealth. She had to do it herself.
I love this image right here. It's where she's, holding her whip in front of her. I mean, this could be a comic cover right here. Do you have any more information about the model and the photographer who took this?
Yeah, I took that one.
Okay. Well, good job.
My business partner, myself, we probably shot 90% of the photos, and then we had like some photographers come in for, about 10% of the book. Just on busy days where I have a lot of costumes I have to make, because I do all the costumes myself too. On those days, I have to, like, we're not a big company. There's like 2 of us who run the company, and then there's like 1 or 2 employees who are casually for me. So it was pretty much 2 people made this book, mostly. Even though I have a lot of credits at the end, some of those people helped for an hour, but I have to give them credit. But Craig and I, we did the lion's share of this. So we do most of it. Anne Duffy, she's the model. She has worked with me on a number of. She's in a few of my other books as well. Those books are a little bit different. So I have 2 other books. My first 2 books were called Wookiee Erotica, Volume 1 and Volume 2. It's like a 1970s Playboy, but based on Star Wars. So we have all the fake ads, the articles. It's just going to be a comedy. It's a comedy piece,
Right.
And she plays my Twi'lek in that. She's a blue Twi'lek.
Okay.
If anyone's ever seen that book, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's one of the most requested images for people who want to buy off me. But yeah, Wookiee Eroticas are a comedy book. But if you've got a younger fan base, you'll have to wait till you're a little bit older to get those ones. But yeah, she started modeling from me years ago, and she looks like Catwoman. Like,
right.
She has that physicality about her. And I suppose for me, when I start casting all these people, it's all in their eyes. If they can tell me who their character is in their eyes just by a look, then I know it's right. And that's the thing. When you look at all these people, look at their eyes and see if you can. That's what you're looking at when you think, oh, they're perfect. It's because they're selling it to you through the eyes.
What character am I?
Definitely one that belongs in Arkham.
This guy, talk about some eyes. We're looking at Man-Bat here.
That's Anthony again.
Yeah.
Played the Joker.
Man, this is some awesome costume design.
Yeah, we just wanted like more of a body horror aspect to it. Like someone who looked like they're in pain from it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
He's in like mid-transformation. He doesn't have wings. I'm not saying he doesn't eventually get them. Like, look at his like elbows, how they're like warping, like his arms. You know, they're warping. His fingers are getting longer. People just want everything given it to him straight away. Like everyone goes, "Oh, give him wings, give him wings." I'm like, yeah, but then you're entering a different territory. Like, you know, this one, you can feel his pain and his emotion of what he's going through. And that's what we wanted in this, you know. It's been most of the villains, if you read up on them, they're all very tragic souls. You know, we try and ground them and give them some sympathy. But then, you know, we also try and make it grounded by saying, well, there was experiments happening at the time where we were trying to crossbreed with animals. You know, like Russia spent a lot of money on a program to try and breed women with gorillas.
What, really? Oh.
And that's real history. You know, I'm not making that one up.
Oh. You also get into one of the most iconic Batman stories with Nightfall and Azrael.
Well, I had to do Nightfall because that's when I was reading comics when I was at high school, when that came out. And I remember everyone hating his design so much when it first came out. And it wasn't until later I realized that the comic characters did that on purpose, you know, to really make this character hated, you know. But he was hard to nail. It took me about 3 attempts to get this one right because it just was such a silly kind of design originally, you know, like it's so comic booky, you know, it's so top heavy and ridiculous. And I was just like, okay, I wanted someone who feels like that they're like the tank version of a Batman, you know?
Right.
And we wanted to bring in like his brainwashing and the system and just really ground it. And, you know, and then another secret society, like between, like in the book, I think we've got like 6 secret societies and about 10 freaking criminal organizations. Comics doesn't matter. But book, it's tough because they're only pages apart of these storylines. But Nightfall was a big one. And that was like, to me, it's like Batman coming face to face with like what he's created, like the sins of what he's created. And it's after the Shadow War. So, and after like he gets his back broken by Bane. And it kind of comes full circle because in the book, he kills Harvey Dent. And that's what brings back Bruce back to stop him and go, okay, this has gone too far. You know, I've got to take control of this now. And I always loved that character, but I always want to do it a little bit more grounded and a little bit more twisted. And having him kill Bruce's best friend from his youth, kind of Bruce saw it as, fuck, I've got to tie this up. We're gonna stop this now. It's gone on for too long, and I have to break the cycle.
I love this bat suit.
Oh, my Art Deco helmet.
Man, that's so cool. I love that. Do you still have that helmet?
Yeah. I still got that one. I think I gave because Batfeed, he kind of actually gave us a lot of attention through his videos, you gotta say. So I gave him the Nightfall helmet from the book. But this one, I just love that design. When I was trying to create it, I said it should be a helmet. Like anytime my pet peeve in like historical battle films, no one's ever wearing helmets. Like in Game of Thrones, you always see their pretty faces when they're in battle. And if you look at any actual like reenactors or like experts on fighting, they're like shield and helmet. Almost every soldier would have that as a must because that's the stuff where he kills you. You know? Like you need your shield and helmet. So for me, it had to be a helmet moving forward to offer that kind of level of protection for him. And and I just was like, what's just something that's going to look fucking cool, you know, like of the time, and an Art Deco style, and make it almost like a Bakelite radio. Like if you remember like Bakelite before plastic, that's what I was kind of going for. Like new technologies are emerging where they can actually form this stuff, and molds are starting to be used around this time to produce things. So we're moving over to things like black Bakelite, and then soon we'll move to plastic once plastic starts getting invented after World War II. But yeah, so we just went for something that kind of looked of the period, you know, like could feel like it was from that like period where Art Deco was, you know, the height of design.
Yeah, and that leather cape, I mean, it really gives the aesthetic of like leather wings. I mean, I thought you nailed it on this. I'd love to see more photos of that suit. I love it. What else we got? We got Deathstroke. Now this is a guy that looks like he'd kick your ass.
I've always hated Deathstrokes in live action.
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you just cast someone who looks like the character? Don't try and force these actors to put fucking dye in their beards and that. Like Joe Medliello in that one shot. I'm like, you just, like, don't get me wrong, you look cool for a cosplay guy. But
Yeah, but I don't believe that a mercenary like Deathstroke is spending time bleaching his hair.
yeah, exactly. So I went with the silver fox dude. You know, someone who went very young. You know, and also like I just with this, I wanted something just practical, leather again, and then it's more like he's just had like I always loved my reference for like this is the original David Lynch Dune, where Paul gets his personal 10 guards, and what they do is they just put like red paint on their shoulders, and that's how they like are separated from all the other Fremen. And I always just thought that was a simple badass way to kind of do that, and that's what I've kind of done here. So that's my reference for that.
I love it. And I love this Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is like one of my favorite rogues.
Well, me too, and that's why I wanted to do it properly. It did take me a few attempts to get it right.
Right.
That's
Even included
Anthony again.
That's Anthony again. You included his ice gun and his hyperbolic chamber that he sleeps in. Didn't have Nora, but that's for book 2, right?
No, well, I almost shot Nora, but like I said, I was gonna have her frozen in like the tank and everything. But I just ran out of money. Like as I said, man, I go and work, I make a little bit of money, and then I come and shoot all this stuff.
Well, you can't have everything, you know. I mean, and plus, yes, she would be a big part of Mr. Freeze's story, but I thought, you already gave us, I mean, gosh, over 240 pages of material. I mean,
yeah, it's 250. I think it's 250 now.
250? Okay. Is this Anthony too?
Yep.
Wow. So this is at the very end of the book when I guess Joker's finally been caught, and in Arkham Asylum.
He's truly unhinged now. He's
right.
Harley's had to leave him because he was so abusive to her.
Oh, we need to show Harley. Let me get her pulled up. Oh, sorry, I kind of get these out of order. Oh, here we go. I love the design you put for Harley because, one thing with Harley is I never liked the big, oversized mallet.
Yeah,
here you gave her an axe. Yeah. Gag. And I was like, that's genius because, I mean, one, it's lighter. She could wield it a lot easier. And then probably actually more useful, practical.
And Harley Quinn, the axe murderer.
And this Harley looks similar to the original inspiration for Harley's look too, which was Arlene Sorkin, a scene that she appeared in Days of Our Lives that Paul Dini had seen. Yeah, and that this has similarities to that.
Yeah, that was one of the big references. There was also a shot from a film from that period as well. It has that diamond pattern in the tights, and this girl has this little beret, which I kind of used as a reference. The way I described Harley with her look was, I wanted the most adorable and scary ex-girlfriend you could ever have. You know, like you look at her, oh, she's sweet, but there's some crazy behind those eyes. You know, and a lot of people, like not a lot of people, I always say a lot of people. It's like a couple of people questioned that I didn't make her a psychiatrist in this one. I simplified her backstory and turned her into almost like a candy striper, like an orderly kind of helper at the Arkham to earn money. And she gets seduced by the Joker that way, you know, and she's from this broken home where her father abuses her and all this kind of stuff. Now, with that, I did that purely because if you look at history, 3% of women were doctors in America at that time.
Right.
And even less was psychiatrists, you know, because that was a new man's kind of science. That was the exciting science, what men did. So it didn't make sense if I was being accurate to the time, to make her character that. But I felt like we did a good version of her through the book. Like we in the first book, I only had her in there like that once, like the first printing, but I did do some reshoots and I have her pop up a few more times. Like she gets her kind of comeuppance towards the end of the book where she forms her own crew, and
right.
Then we have a nod for her as a Suicide Squad as well.
Right. Who is this guy?
The Mad Hatter.
The Mad Hatter.
The actor. Man, I just found that dude online. And I hit him up. I flew him to Sydney because he was perfect. You know, he was everything I want him to be. You know, and he turned up. He goes, "Oh, do you want me? I've got. I can take this tooth out. Do you want me to?" I'm like, "Yes."
He just keeps getting better.
Yeah. So it's funny because I shoot so fast, man. I'm like the fastest shooter you ever see. I shot, you know, I get these guys in, I dress them up, and I shoot them for like these type of guys. I shoot them for 45 seconds, maybe a minute. And then I go, all right, thanks, bye. He was on set for like half an hour, you know, if that.
Really? Was this a custom suit that you designed as well?
No. We well, I bought some old stuff and then I just tore it down, broke it down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this one was just a bit of decorating, like with the suit. It's just like, you know, I just had to break it down and, you know, rip it apart and make it look dirty and old and whatnot. And with this older stuff, it's easy to do, but you also don't want to fuck up like original vintage clothes. So I just use, you know, the magic of costume design to hide all of it, and anything else I can use in Photoshop. It's at the end of the day, it's not like when we make films, these are photos, so it's a lot easier to manipulate the images. But for us, we more remove things than add things because we want to keep it real as much as we can.
And I like
I can't stress enough how important how well you do the costumes are, because you see so many things. You know, it happens a lot in cosplay, and sure, people have limited budgets with some of that stuff, but you see so many photos and things are like, well, okay, yeah, I see that's supposed to be a suit that this Joker's wearing, but it's not a suit, it's a costume. And that's important for the authenticity, that all of this stuff, it is real clothing and it looks like it. And
real clothing from the time, so no synthetic stuff, you know, and actually making it out of fabrics they have access to, and colors what were there, because a lot of the modern colors what we use these days weren't around then. They didn't have the dye facilities to do it, so you know, it's really hard to compare it by today's standards, you know. And having something yellow, for example, like the Robin capes, that's a pricey investment, you know. So
Riddler, this guy, he really loved doing this photo set, I could tell.
Yeah, well, his inspiration was, his look was like, this guy kind of has a Buster Keaton look to him, so I really lent into that. And this is one of my good friends, Jamie J. Katz. He's a really interesting guy. If you ever want to read up about him, his name's J. Katz, or Jamie Leonardo. And there's a whole bunch of documentaries out there based on him. He's a very interesting dude. I always recommend everyone going to research who he is, the performer. But yeah, I wanted like more of a the classic kind of serial killer vibe. He's more like, if you ever saw that show Hannibal, based on Hannibal Lecter, kind of like someone like that who, you know, enjoys the finer things in life, but very bored, and he does this as stimulation for himself.
Yeah, you gave him a very creepy backstory, which works great in this context, in this time. Like you said, he's a lawyer that
again, he
was kind of bored.
Guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I want to present these characters a little bit differently than probably how you've seen them before. And the Riddler sometimes can be, some people, if they don't know how, you know, the essence of that character, can present him like a Joker knockoff. And I really want to stay away from that. So I went with someone a lot older than my version of the Joker. And someone who's kind of based on the idea of like doing the perfect crime. And I think Batfeet goes into it a little bit more, because I give him a lot of my references and notes as far as, you know, so he can see what I was researching at the time. But like Leo and Leopold, those guys who try to pull the perfect murder at college, and they thought they were geniuses. And they were very smart guys, but they thought they were way smarter than they were. And I just thought, what if they succeeded? You know? And then there's obviously what Matt Reeves is doing. One of the big references was the Zodiac Killer, you know,
right,
and whatnot. So, you know, we're all drinking from the same fountain, essentially, when it comes to that. But yeah, my version, I just want to make a little bit older, use a little bit more refined. He had to be smarter than more physical. And like, he first killed when he was at college, so that outfit, it might look like it's appropriate for the time, but it's a little bit older than the time I've presented it in. So that striped jacket is more of a university or college jacket, whether like the Ivy League colleges had, and that kind of cane hat was a little bit earlier as well, like the Beta hat. So he's kind of, his outfit comes out of when he first killed someone, which was when he was at college. And so he wears that outfit more like a ceremonial thing. Like that's his routine when he kills somebody. And he's done that every time. So yeah, I just want to give some story to even the costumes. Now, you'll never read any of that in the book, but that's what I had to come up with in my head in order to make it sense for me.
I love learning about that, about the whole creative process. I mean, because now when I go back and, like you said before, you can go back to this book time after time and always find something new. You put in plenty of Easter eggs throughout the book and nods to various stories. I'm trying to find one thing that I know you hit an Easter egg in.
I give this example. Black Canary's not in the book, but she is.
Now, this is Bruce Wayne's belongings left behind when he was, you know, out and about in the world, left behind with the League of Assassins.
Yeah, he had to leave them quick, so he left all his belongings there.
And I got to
that's
looking
what
at...
Damien gets to know his father from. Stories and those belongings.
I keep looking at that amulet with that picture of the woman and was looking through the book. Can you tell me who that is?
Yep, that's what's her name? I blanked on her name. Mask of the Phantasm. What's her name?
Andrea Beaumont.
Helen?
Andrea Beaumont.
Andrea.
Yeah. Oh, Andrea. Okay.
Andrea. So that's Andrea. So I got a photo of the model from when she was younger and put that in there.
Perfect. Because
I was going to mention that too. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. And I like in that other picture too. There was the
Mask of Zorro, what he was reading at the time. Which, if you know those, like Scarlet Pimpernel was really the first person to do the rich person with an alter ego with a mask.
Right.
And then there's a whole bunch of stuff littered in there. Like even the map. If you look at the map clearly, you can't really see it that clearly, but there's stuff in there as well.
I liked the Zatara poster there too, so that's a Zatanna Easter egg.
Yeah, well, that's part of his training. He learned how to be an escape artist through him.
Well, I think that's a good stopping point, and we can wrap this up because we could talk about this book, for hours. There's so much content and there's so many, Easter eggs and so much story in Gotham 1919 to 1939. I mean, we could talk about this forever. And the good thing is you can actually, listener, get a copy for yourself. Where can they get that?
Only one place, giantpandaking.com. That's it. So sold through my website. We have about 500 or 400 copies left of this print run. This print run won't be done again probably until after the next two books. So the next two books, what we're doing is Themyscira 1933 to 1963, which is Wonder Woman's story.
Oh, wow.
And we finish off the stories with Metropolis 1925 to 1945. Now, these stories are parallel stories and sequels. They'll fill in gaps. They'll tell the stories from a different perspective. The effects of one book will carry on to the next book. Some of the stuff you see in Gotham, what's not explained, will be explained in other books. For example, the Suicide Squad mission, what we show a photo of at the end of Gotham, that will be explained what that mission is in Metropolis, for example.
Very cool.
And things like that. So they're all interconnected, the books. I'll be presenting we'll be probably printing 5,000 copies each of those two books, but that will be it. And then we'll probably do one more print run of Gotham after those, of about, a couple of thousand, and then that'll be it. And then we shut down our store, and we won't be printing anymore. We'll also be scrubbing it from the internet as much as we can. We want this to become a myth. We want this to be for the people who did the work, got it. Then we're going to kill it, and it's just going to live on in the way people talk about it. And that's the way we always designed it to be. Something what's not just, you have to put in the work if you want to be part of it. It's part of the journey. You don't just get it because it exists.
Very cool. So that's www.giantpandaking.com. Now, you also, on that link, have a link for US and Canada customers that also want to get a copy of that as well.
For North America, make sure you look at the top. It says, do you want to buy from the US store? And that will just change the shipping cost only, because we ship out of LA. We have a whole bunch of books in a warehouse there, but we also ship out of Australia. So depending on where you are, it might be cheaper to ship. Obviously, if you're in North America, ship from the US. But if you're in the rest of the world, like obviously Asia or anywhere close to Australia, it's going to be cheaper to go through us. But if you're from Europe, maybe just check which is the cheaper option for you.
Very cool. Now, we can find you on Instagram at Giant Panda King. Just everyone, please go follow Giant Panda King, because coming up, we're actually going to be doing a giveaway of this book. So you need to follow Giant Panda King. That's one of the first priorities that you need to do. Can't stress that enough. Also, go look at their other products that they have. The Wookiee erotica book. I flipped through, the online photos.
Oh, I bet you did.
And then also, there's some awesome shirts on your website as well.
So we've got 4 books coming out over the next 2 years, and then that's kind of it for our books. We're moving mostly over the film and a few other things. But we've got, the 2 books to finish off this series. Then we've got a Ghostbusters book coming out called The Last Station, which is our kind of sequel to the first 2 films. Very different. Again, like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Afterlife for what it was, but Afterlife for me, like, I could have replaced the Ecto one with a phone booth or a DeLorean or whatever. It's just interchangeable nostalgia, which I'm all for. I enjoyed it, liked it. But for me, a Ghostbusters book is about being in a city. It's about being a team. It's about calling yourself actually a Ghostbuster. And for us, so we're doing our own version of Ghostbusters called The Last Station. It's set in Detroit. And And then we've got The Life of Planet of the Apes coming out. So that's a photo book, and we're creating all the classic covers of Life and Time magazine over the years, but with the original Planet of the Apes makeup for all the people.
Very cool. A lot of stuff to be excited about coming up. So
Cool, guys.
follow Giant Panda King and also check out giantpandaking.com. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here at Bat Force Radio. Russell, thank you so much for coming on.
No, thanks for having us. Anytime I get to talk about myself, it's a good day.
And it's not just it's just not the same when you're talking to yourself about yourself.
Yeah. About yourself.
Hey, now I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what. All right. Well, thank you very much, and Bat Force out.